Hey guys, AK James 762. This is the next installment in my Firearms 101 series. This is how does a firearm actually work? And I've got a few examples of different types of firearms in front of me, and I have a few that are next to me that won't fit on the table all at once. Now, I'm not going to get into extreme detail, but I'm going to explain the basic principles of how a firearm functions. Okay. This is not a bullet. This is a round of ammunition. The tip, that's the bullet. And it sits down further inside this brass piece that's called the casing. The little circle in the middle, that's called the primer. Basically, these have all been safety checked, by the way. When you insert a loaded magazine into a firearm, whether it be a handgun, whether it be a pistol, rifle, shotgun that takes a detachable magazine, whatever. You insert a full magazine and you rack it. What you are doing as you're pulling this back and pushing it forward is you are pulling the first round out of the magazine, like so, into the chamber of the firearm. That's the chamber in there. The chamber is the very beginning of the barrel. So as this is closed, this round of ammunition is right here inside the chamber. When you pull the trigger, hear that click? That's the firing pin. It's either the striker or the hammer hitting the firing pin, and the firing pin juts forward and hits the primer, causing a tiny little ignition. Sorry, my camera's having trouble focusing. Causing a tiny little ignition inside the casing, which ignites the gunpowder in the rest of the casing, causing a miniature explosion, which causes the bullet to be launched from the casing. Now when that happens, and you hear boom, the slide's going to come back, and when the slide, you're going to feel the recoil, the slide's going to come back, the bullet will have already left the barrel. As the slide comes back, it's going to eject the spent casing, which is going to look like this, and it's going to be empty, and it's going to be hot. It's going to eject the spent casing, and then come back forward as such, chambering the next round. That's how a semi-automatic pistol works. Revolvers work a little bit differently. This is the cylinder on a revolver. It works similar to a magazine on a semi-auto pistol. You load the cylinder, you close it. This is a double action. This can be fired as a double action or a single action. What does that mean? That means when I want to fire this revolver in single action, it means I want to cock the hammer back. That way, when the trigger is squeezed, there's only one action taking place. The hammer is dropping onto the firing pin, which is hitting the primer, which is causing, like I stated, the chain reaction, the explosion inside the casing, causing the bullet to come from the barrel. Like such. When you fire this in double action, you don't cock the hammer back, you just squeeze the trigger. As you're squeezing the trigger, it's going to rotate the cylinder to the next round, also cocking the hammer back. And when you squeeze the trigger all the way to the rear, it fires again. That's double action. That's single action. Single action revolvers that only fire in single action, you have to cock the hammer back and pull the trigger each time you want to fire. This one, I can just pull the trigger and it will fire each one until it's empty. Now, it's easier to reload a semi-auto because you just drop the magazine and insert a new full magazine. With a revolver, you have to open it, eject the spent shells, load your new ammunition in there, and close it. When the bullet is fired, it hits grooves in the barrel called rifling. You may be able to see it, you may not. Let's see. You can kind of see the grooves in there. Those grooves inside that barrel, that's called rifling. What that does is these bullets are usually made of lead and they're jacketed with copper, such as this one. Now, lead and copper are a softer metal than steel, which is what most gun barrels are made of. So when this explosion happens and this bullet is fired from the chamber and goes into the barrel and it hits those grooves, the grooves are always going to be in a spiral pattern. So once it hits those grooves, it starts to spiral itself. So as it's spiraling through the barrel, when it exits the muzzle, it's spinning. And the longer your barrel, the more kinetic energy it's going to build up as it's going through the barrel. And once it exits, it's going to be spinning at a much higher rate than out of a shorter barrel. And that's where your long-range accuracy comes from. That's why a lot of designated marksman rifles or sniper rifles or whatever you want to call them, like in the military or police, usually have a longer barrel. They're usually longer than 16 inches. They're usually about 20 inches or so. So that's how those handguns work. This is an AK pistol, but it works exactly the same as an AK rifle. I didn't want to have one of my rifles up here. It's just big and bulky for the purposes of this video. Works exactly the same as an AK rifle. And very, very similar to the semi-auto pistol. You put your magazine in, you chamber it, or you rack it, which will chamber the first round. Your chamber's in there. You'll chamber your first round. You fire, and if you look through here, you can actually see the hammer hit the rear end of the bolt, send the firing pin forward, causes an explosion, just, same way. This is the barrel that runs through here. This is the end of the barrel. But right here, this is your front sight, but it's also what's called a gas block. In the barrel, there's a tiny hole drilled in the top of the barrel, and it lines up with a hole in this gas block. This is the gas tube that runs under the top handguard. Inside the gas tube is a piston that is connected to the bolt carrier group. So when you fire, the bullet exits the bore. Some of the gases are redirected through that tiny hole into the gas block, into the gas tube, and they push the piston back, causing the entire bolt carrier group to go backwards. And that works just like the semi-auto pistol. That causes the shell, the spent casing, to be ejected, and as it comes back forward, it causes a new round to be chambered, so you can repeat firing. This is kind of what it looks like inside. Like I said, fires. This spring pushes the bolt carrier group forward. There's the end of the piston. That's how it works. Like I said, AK rifles work the same way. ARs work basically the same way. There's no piston, except there are piston-driven ARs. But AR-15s work pretty much the same. There's a hole in the top, drilled into the top of the barrel. There's a gas block. There's a gas tube, but instead of a piston, the gas goes into the bolt carrier group, which causes the same sort of action. There are also different types of actions. This is a very popular shotgun action. This is a double barrel. This is what's called break action. Use a lever and you open it. You insert your 2 shotgun shells. You close it. Cock the hammers. Take your safety off. Fire each one. Boom, boom. After they're fired, you push the lever. You open it back up. Take your 2 shells out. Put 2 more in and repeat the process. This is not magazine fed. It's not semi-automatic. It's what's called break action. So you have to manually load 2 shells at a time. Fire the 2 shells, manually unload and reload the 2 shells. They also sell break actions in a single shot, where you open it, it's only got 1 barrel, you put 1 shell in, close it, cock the hammer, fire, open it, take the spent shell out, put a new shell in, close it, and repeat. Those are very, very popular and generally very inexpensive. This is another shotgun action. This is probably the most popular shotgun action out there, I would have to say. This is what's called pump action. This tube is the magazine, similar to this type of magazine, only you can't readily detach this, load it, and attach it again. Obviously on top is the barrel. So you load this magazine. This particular one holds 7 shells. You load 7 shells in there. You pump it. What that does, when you bring it back like this, there's a little elevator in the shell elevator right there. It drops down. One of the shells in the tube will drop into the shell elevator, and as you bring it forward, the elevator lifts up level with the chamber and bore and barrel, and as you're bringing the pump action forward, there's the bolt, and then it locks closed. You fire, and as you bring this, as it comes all the way back, the spent shell ejects, and at the same time a new shell is dropped into the elevator, and as you push forward, same exact sequence. The elevator comes up, lining the shell up with the barrel. The bolt comes forward, locks it into place. Fire again. Same exact thing. Ejects the shell. New one goes in the elevator, comes up, bolt locks it in. Very, very simple. In fact, if I were going to recommend a shotgun to anyone, especially someone who's never fired a shotgun before, I would recommend a pump action, to be quite honest with you. They're reliable, and they're my favorite type of shotgun. Also, this is another type of rifle. This is a bolt action rifle. This particular one has a detachable magazine. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Put the magazine in. Here's your bolt handle. Lift it up. Pull it back. There's the red follower on the magazine. So if it were loaded with ammunition, as you're bringing it forward, it's chambering the first round for you. You lock it closed. Here's your safety. You fire. And just like the pump action, it's all manual. Lift the bolt handle back up, pull it back, and as you pull it back and it makes all the way to the rear, it ejects the spent casing, and you push it forward, and it brings the next round into the chamber. Lock it closed, fire, and repeat. Very, very simple. Guns are very, very simple if you take the time to learn how to correctly use them. Now, like I said before, I'm not an expert on ballistics, but I do know how a firearm functions. I do know what happens when you pull the trigger with a loaded chamber. So I hope this video helped out any first-timers or beginners or anything like that looking for information regarding firearms. I always like to keep as much correct information in my videos as possible, and I personally am a hands-on learner. You can describe to me how something works, but if I've never handled it personally, you can tell me all day long and I may not pick it up. But you give me this, and you say, here, figure out how this works. I'll figure it out.